In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Hello everyone, it's me again, Father Stephen, and this is class 58 of our Orthodox Survival course, and the title for today's talk is The Preparation for the Corona Delusion, the Technocracy and its False Religion, a Needed Review. Of course, I always want to start by thanking our donors. May the Lord reward your love with His grace. And if anyone wants to help, if you have PayPal, you can send a gift to my PayPal account at frstevenallen@gmail.com. And if anyone wants to receive a receipt, contact me at that email address, and I can tell you how to donate to our parish. And our parish treasurer will send you a receipt for your donation. Introduction. Our talk on the Corona Delusion attracted some attention. That was I sent that out as Orthodox Survival Course number 57, and we had more listeners than as usual. When I was checking our statistics, there are a lot of people who were listening. And we also attracted some negative attention as well. Now, when I say the Corona Delusion, I'm not referring to the existence of disease. You know, people say, well, you deny that the virus exists and nobody's dying. Well, that's a red herring, and nobody's saying that. Okay, I'm not denying the existence of disease, whatever the disease is. Okay, we're talking about the response to the disease, which is a centrally planned, and obviously long ago planned, right? Centrally planned, centrally controlled, inconceivably gigantic, top-down social re-engineering project throughout the whole world, overturning every normal activity of earthly life, with no precedent in history, and which, we are being told by those in authority, will have no end. It's the new normal. Yet, despite this, many persons previously thought rational, including Orthodox Christians, now fanatically insist that this radical, coercively imposed, and permanent change in man's condition be subject to no serious criticism. This is eerie, it's very strange, it's surreal. There is some kind of unnatural mental and moral blindness going on here. It seems like it really is some kind of a hypnosis or demonic spell over these people's minds, right? Yet this is what we're looking at. This is what we're seeing right in front of us. So COVID denial is joining the list of heinous thought crimes for which there is no punishment bad enough, for which there can be no forgiveness, like Holocaust denial and climate change denial. Okay, now we have COVID denial. Okay. So people like me may indeed in the near future simply be locked up or liquidated. I think some people are already being locked up and liquidated. We are intolerable heretics. We're enemies of the brave new world that science is bringing into being. The man-made millennium in which there will be no death or disease, only the unending gratification of material desires free from all risk of interruption by unpleasantness. But how have we supposedly rational men, much less Orthodox Christians, come to believe in this? The people who believe in it had to be prepared. They had to have been predisposed to believe the current delusion by having already accepted and interiorized previous delusions. Okay, so they were people's minds were long prepared for this. In today's talk, I'd like to discuss some of these previous delusions, which in fact we talked about 2 years ago, well before COVID came onto the scene. By so doing, I'm returning to the purpose of our survival course, which is intended to be not just one more internet current events show where we get all worked up by reacting to every new bit of bad news, right? But rather, our course is intended to be an ongoing, serious study to help us understand how the entire scope of history and the important events and ideas of history fit into an Orthodox framework. Recent history, that is, from the Renaissance period through the 20th century, can enlighten us about why so many people are now going nuts. I mean, they're going so crazy, and they're believing so fanatically in the brave new world being created by our rulers with the excuse that they're fighting the coronavirus. And the timeless teaching of the Church on man's condition and man's ultimate purpose can enlighten us as to why this fanatical belief is so wrong and it's so bad. So the title of today's talk then is The Preparation for the Corona Delusion, the Technocracy and its False Religion. So the previous delusion is a delusion perpetrated by the technocracy, and this delusion is the false religion of technocracy, and this false religion is scientism. Okay? The new governing reality in the world is the technocracy, and its religion is scientism. Part 1. Francis Bacon and the New Atlantis. Technocracy means government by technocrats. Who are they? They're a managerial class that serves a hidden elite group who control the development and use of technology, and who therefore also necessarily control the direction of the science that underlies the technology. Remember, people confuse science and technology. Science is the pursuit, science is the theoretical side, right? It's the pursuit of truth in the empirical realm, or the natural realm, right? And technology is taking the findings of science and putting it to work in making gadgets, or making technical objects, gadgets, machines, systems, and so forth, that actually do things in the real world based on the theoretical knowledge that science has gained. Okay? So I'll say this again. Technocracy means government by technocrats, a managerial class that serves a hidden elite group who control the development and use of technology, and who therefore also necessarily control the direction of the science that underlies the technology. It is like Plato's vision in the Republic of a society ruled by an elite of philosophers, except that here, with the technocracy, we don't have men who are concerned with acquiring wisdom and controlling their passions, as in the Socratic dialogues, not Platonic philosophers. Right? Rather, these men are concerned with acquiring and using ever more powerful technology in order to gratify their passions, to dominate creation, dominate God's creation as if they're gods, right? And to control other people, to control whole human populations. So let's say this again. What we have here are men who are concerned with acquiring and using ever more powerful technology in order to gratify their passions, to dominate creation, and to control human populations. You may recall our earlier discussion of the 16th and 17th century English writer Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon. And his vision for a future society, which he calls the New Atlantis. You can find the discussion notes and you can find the audio at Orthodox Survival Course Class 17. And today I'm going to review this section on Bacon. Remember, I wrote this 2 years ago. So here are the notes from Class 17 on Science and Technology in the Renaissance. Science and Technology. Just as Pico de Mirandola's Oration on the Dignity of Man can be said to be the manifesto of the Renaissance in general, and Machiavelli's The Prince is the classic statement of Renaissance political theory, one could say that Francis Bacon's utopian novel New Atlantis and his works on the role of science and technology in society, such as The New Organon, form the charter of modern scientism, the idea that man can perfect life on earth by scientific and philosophic advancement. Let's say this again. Francis Bacon's utopian novel New Atlantis and his works on the role of science and technology in society, such as New Organon, form the charter of modern scientism, the idea that man can perfect life on earth by scientific and philosophic advancement. The article on Bacon in the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy sums up his influence thus, quote, He, Bacon, died in 1626, leaving behind a cultural legacy that, for better or worse, includes most of the, quote, foundation for the triumph of technology and for the modern world as we currently know it. So this is somebody who's important. Now listen, folks, I'm not quoting from a conspiracy website. Okay, this wasn't written by some kid wearing a swastika armband sitting in his mother's basement. All right? This is the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Bacon died in 1626, leaving behind a cultural legacy that, for better or for worse, includes most of the foundation for the triumph of technology and for the modern world as we currently know it. So, wow, he's an important guy. Let's see what he had to say. Bacon, a classic Renaissance man, statesman, philosopher, jurist, scientist, author, lived during the reigns of Elizabeth I and James I of England. There are various theories about his involvement with occult sects, such as the Freemasons and the Rosicrucians. But one need not prove his formal connections to these groups to understand his fundamental idea, stated in his Meditationes Sacrae, that knowledge itself is power. He's the man who coined that, right? Knowledge is power. Okay, so knowledge isn't about glorifying God. Knowledge is not about beautifying the soul. Knowledge is power. That's the whole deal right there in a nutshell. And by the way, speaking of science and the occult, remember that very advanced science functions like magic, right? It does these magical things. It transforms nature with apparently no effort, right? Which is the goal of alchemy and of magic. So you have to be very careful about science, very careful about technology, right? These are very powerful instruments in our hands. We're stewards of God's creation. We're not little gods dominating creation, all right? But here we go with Bacon talking about knowledge being power. So let's go on. The real power in a Baconian society is held by those who know the secrets of science. In New Atlantis, the real power in Ben Salem, his utopian island realm, the real power is not in the hands of the government, but in the hands of a secret society of scholars who form the College of Solomon's House. And you wonder why he chose these Old Testament names. That's interesting. Solomon's House, right? And who deliberately withhold knowledge from the purported rulers of the society. So they're a secret group, they have the real knowledge, and they withhold the knowledge from their supposed rulers, right? So the father of Solomon House states in the book, the father, the head of the Solomon House states, and this we do also. We have consultations which of the inventions and experiences which we have discovered shall be published, and which not, which will be published and which will not be published. And we all take an oath of secrecy for the concealing of those we think fit to keep secret, though some of those we do reveal sometime to the state, and some not. So this is a group that's above the state. And they're controlling the state through the power of science, and they reveal to the heads of state what they want, and they keep back what they don't want the heads of state to know, right? So the government becomes just an interface between the people and the private occult group that control the keys of science and technology. Okay, this is not a conspiracy theory in a website. Okay, this is Francis Bacon. This is a book from your great books list. Right? And as the other author says, he's laying the foundations for modern society. So don't tell me this is a conspiracy theory. This idea is completely consonant with an idea we saw earlier in our study of the Renaissance, that science is linked to occult knowledge, that it is employed in order to have power over the society. And I'm not saying science is necessarily linked to occult knowledge, but in the Renaissance, where all the leading thinkers and the popes and the princes and the cardinals are all involved in secret societies and all involved in occult worship, okay, and they're the people funding and promoting and being engaged in science, right? The same people. Okay? Science here is linked to occult knowledge, and this occult knowledge is employed in order to have power over the society, right? So remember, the whole idea is power. Go back to Machiavelli. Okay? What is being proposed in New Atlantis, or rather depicted, is that a secret oligarchy with the keys to scientific knowledge and technology should hold also the keys to political power. Okay, let me say this again. This is Francis Bacon. Okay, this isn't Alex Jones, all right? This is Francis Bacon. Okay, what is being depicted, a secret oligarchy with the keys to scientific knowledge and technology should hold also the keys to political power. which they dole out as they will to the state, which is no longer the true governing power, but just an interface, as we might say today, for the real governing power, which is occult and irresponsible. That is, it's hidden and it has no accountability to anybody else. So the state may have a good system, may have a good constitution, or there may be a good king, and they feel accountable to their people, but they're being controlled. They're like a puppet of a higher power, who are the elite that controls science and technology. It is rather obvious how this applies to our situation today. Okay, now I'm writing this. Okay, these are words I'm writing 2 years ago. I have been interrupting my words from 2 years ago, but now I'm reading words from 2 years ago. It is rather obvious how this applies to our situation today, 2018, in which only the extremely fatuous still believe that our political institutions are not puppets manipulated by an irresponsible oligarchy through technocratic methods of control. Okay, let me say this again. I wrote this in 2018, and Father Stephen didn't invent this idea, right? This is not rocket science. It is rather obvious how all of the above about Bacon and all that applies to our situation today, in which only the extremely fatuous, must be very sheltered people, whatever, I don't know, absurdly naive people, okay? Only the extremely fatuous still believe that our political institutions are not puppets manipulated by an irresponsible oligarchy through technocratic methods of control. The Orthodox Christian concept of the roles of science and technology is this: the primary role of science is to adorn man's mind with knowledge, to beautify the mind, right, in order to inspire the contemplation of God and His creation. The role of technology is to help man find the moderate amount of earthly happiness he needs in order to practice virtue, to avoid excessive earthly sorrows on the one hand, while avoiding excessive earthly joys on the other hand, both of which are conducive to vice. There is no room in this concept, in the Orthodox concept, there's no room for unlimited technological progress, which is a quintessentially Luciferian idea, linked to a heretical utopian idea of human perfectibility. The Baconian or New Atlantis ideal, however, is quite different. A high priesthood of scientists and scholars operating in secret will discover truths that will perfect human society on earth. They'll provide the magic that will create a life with no risk, no disease, no death. Just trust them. And you don't have to be afraid. You can be safe. Have you noticed? That was the end of the notes. I'm going back now to I'm speaking now again in 2020. People no longer say, farewell, goodbye, I hope to see you soon. They say, be safe, be safe. Everyone's so afraid. They want to be safe. And the technocratic elite say, we'll make you safe. Trust us. There'll be no risk. No risk. Notice that all these draconian lockdowns, all this insane social engineering was done, foisted on us on the basis of probability, statistical models of probability about risk for getting this stupid disease. So people no longer want science or technology to simply ameliorate their condition. They want to be freed of all risk of pain, suffering, of death. Okay? This is man as a total quivering lump of cowardly, fetal position, effeminate stupidity, right? But that's what people want today. They've accepted this delusion that science is going to save them from risk. And if you live like that, you're not living on a human level anymore. Okay, you're just crawling on all fours. You're not even crawling on all fours. Even animals don't live like that, right? At least animals, by their instincts, they just live day to day or moment to moment. They're not obsessed with the risk they're going to take by just living. Okay, but that's what's going on today, right? So these notes on Bacon we went through 2 years ago, and it's describing exactly the theoretical basis, the political basis, and also looking forward to the historical processes that led up exactly to where we are now with this whole COVID thing. Okay, so that was the end of the notes from class 17. So it's easy to see how all this applies to our situation today. It's obvious. Okay, and remember, I wrote these notes 2 years ago when we had no idea that the technocracy was going to pull this COVID stunt. Okay, I mean, I didn't know what they were going to do, but this is, I had to hand it to them. This is brilliant. Okay, but we didn't know this 2 years ago. Okay, they're going to pull this stunt. The problem is that to some extent, everybody, including us Orthodox Christians, everybody has imbibed these incredibly false and evil ideas. Okay, we unconsciously assume it's just in the air. All right, we don't. Orthodox priests don't get up and give sermons saying trust the technocracy. Well, I guess now they do. Some do, but historically, we haven't got up and given sermons saying trust the technocracy. But all of us unconsciously assume that science is this monolithic, magical thing out there, right, with a life of its own. And it's got an identity, a life of its own. Okay, it's some kind of secular Pope of Rome, right? It's going to save you from all error, right? It's infallible. It's benign. It's infallible and benign, just like the Pope, right? He's infallible and benign. And his powers are always being wielded with ever-increasing effectiveness by equally infallible and benign authorities in business, the media, and the government for the constant progress of the human race towards a utopia where there will be no death or disease, only the unlimited and untrammeled enjoyment of material goods. And anyone who opposes this science and these authorities must be a bad guy who must be silenced. He must be a conspiracy theorist. Now, the people who believe this stuff believe it with religious intensity. They have fervor about it, right? They feel self-righteous about it. They feel virtuous about it. Okay, when they want Father Stephen locked up, they feel virtuous about it because it's a religion. Okay, it's the pseudo-religion of scientism. Like all religions, it's ultimately about death. But in this pseudo-religion, it's about freeing you from the risk of death. It's to free you from the risk of death from COVID. We're going to shut down the whole country. We're going to put millions of people out of work. We're going to lock up old people in nursing homes, let them die without their families, and we're going to put a chip in everybody. Okay, and we've got to do it because we are keeping you free from the risk of death, and that's the ultimate desideratum. So anything's worth it, right? Destruction of your freedom, destruction of your nobility, destruction of your ability to worship, destruction of your ability to make moral decisions. It's all worth it because our only purpose in life is to extend our biological existence and to arrive at a world where there's no risk and we can just go day by day playing video games and drinking lattes. Okay, so that's their religion. Part 2. Putting New Atlantis into practice. How we got to where we are today. Okay, so we saw the theoretical basis with Bacon, writing back in 1600 in the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, right? But how do we get there to where we are today, okay, in 2020? How do we get from Francis Bacon to the UN, the WHO, and the 21st century totalitarian reality of the COVID-19 new normal? As they say, follow the money. Now, interestingly enough, the section of Class 17 that follows immediately upon the section we just read is about money, about the new Renaissance conception of economics as opposed to the medieval or Christian conception of economics. So here, let's go on to Class 17. Economics. Economics in the Renaissance. One of the bedrock foundational ideas of Christian economics is that usury, lending money while charging interest, is a grave sin. Christian ecclesiastical and civil codes, East and West, always forbade Christians to practice usury, which is why most usurers in Christian societies prior to the modern period were Jews. Now, a footnote here. I'm putting pause on Class 17. Here's Father Stephen talking in 2020. After Class 17 came out, an Orthodox friend from Romania wrote me and said, "You know, Father, you're off there about usury because in the Eastern Empire, in the Byzantine world, usury was not strictly forbidden. So I said, all right, there are certainly things I don't know about this. So I went to a friend of mine who has a PhD in Byzantine history. And he said, yes, he said, usury or lending money at interest was permitted to a limited extent in the Byzantine Empire, but the rates were, and the practice was controlled tightly by the imperial government. So here we have, again, a principle we talked about earlier based on Dr. Matthew Raphael Johnson's insight that the monarchical power in history has always protected the people from the depredations of the financial oligarchy. Okay? So the imperial government in Byzantium controlled the practice of money lending, and also the richer you were, the lower interest rates you were allowed to charge. So the interest rates were capped at, something really low, like, low by today's standards. Not really low. Low by today's like 5%. And if you were a rich aristocrat, you could only charge 1%, something like that. So even though, yes, literally my friend was right that in the East they didn't absolutely forbid it, but it was still seen as something that's unnatural and evil. Right, something that had to be controlled, that had to be strictly controlled, and it could easily get out of hand and really harm people. Okay, because Jews were always excluded from positions of influence in pre-modern Christian societies, from the government, the military, education, medicine, and so forth, and because the laws against our controlling usury practiced by Christians were strictly enforced, and because the need for having large amounts of money ready to hand is limited in primarily agrarian societies, money lending and debt never dominated economics prior to the modern period. All right, so there are a number of, prior to the modern period, you have primarily agrarian societies, and you also have societies, the Christian societies, where Christian princes, necessarily to protect the society, they guaranteed the life and the property of the Jews, but they necessarily excluded them from positions of influence, from the government, military, education, medicine, and so forth, because, of course, the goals of the Jews are opposite to the goals of Christians. And so if you want to keep a Christian society, you have to keep the Jews, out of positions of authority. So because the need for lots of cash on hand for a number of projects, and the position of the Jews in society was limited, money lending and debt never dominated economics prior to the modern period, in which we have, in the modern period, you have the need of technocratic states for large amounts of capital, and you also have the increasing civil liberty of the Jewish population and the growing dominance of the Jewish population, and therefore money lending and usury in the functions of the society. So this money lending and debt always existed, but it was kept under tight control by Christian rulers and by the church. Okay, we're back to reading the notes from class 17 2 years ago. Even prior to civil liberties being granted to the Jews living in Christian polities, however, which did not take place until much later, and the civil Jews actually being prominent in government, medicine, and so forth, this happens later. Usury entered Western Christian society directly through the rise of Christian-owned banks, first in Italy and later in Austria and the other European nations. The popes, using various casuistic arguments, such as Leo X, who reigned from 1513 to 1521, began allowing for usury in various circumstances. It is quite significant that the trigger for the Lutheran revolt, which was the sale of indulgences, was authorized by Leo X, in order to pay the interest on loans taken out from these Austrian bankers, the Fugger family in Austria, who are financing the building of what? The new St. Peter's in Rome. We say new. From an Orthodox point of view, it's new, right? It only goes back to the 16th century. The giant St. Peter's, right? That gigantic church, which for centuries was the largest covered space on earth, right? This materialistic, sensual, over-the-top demonstration of papal earthly power, St. Peter's. So a Roman Catholic writer, whom I've referred to before, Michael Hoffman, documents this quite convincingly in his book, Usury in Christendom, the Mortal Sin That Was and Now Is Not. Okay, it's Michael Hoffman. Michael's website is revisionisthistory.org, revisionisthistory.org, and you can go to his bookstore And it's good to support Michael Hoffman because he does a lot of good work. And his book is called Usury in Christendom, the Mortal Sin That Was and Now Is Not. So the new Machiavellian technocratic rulers of Europe began financing their ever larger military and technological enterprises through borrowing money. And thus the money power, the bankers and financiers, whether they were Jewish or Christian, the money power over the centuries gained more and more power over the modern European nation-states and their vast overseas empires. Usury fits in perfectly with the alchemical view of science and technology we talked about above, right? Usury fits in perfectly with the alchemical view of science and technology. It is a magic way. It's a trick. It's a scam. It's a trick to increase one's wealth, not by work, but by a trick. Ultimately, like Machiavellian politics and knowledge as power scientism, this is all about gaining power over others. It's about power. It's not about good stewardship. It's not about providing what people really need and oneself being contented with what I really need. It's about power over others and the unlimited acquisition of wealth to do whatever my passions tell me I want to do with it. That's what it's about. At the beginning of this period we are studying, the Renaissance, Dante in the Inferno puts usurers and sodomites in the same circle of hell, because sodomites take what is naturally fertile and make it sterile, while usurers take what is naturally sterile, money, and make it fertile. By the end of this period, this was mere theory. That is, the laws against usury became mere theory. So-called Christian European economies were increasingly dependent on usury, sanctioned by the popes and by the Catholic and Protestant princes. So yes, the Jews became dominant, but you can't just blame the Jews. Okay? We did it to ourselves, because the Orthodox get involved too. In Orthodox economics, now let's go back and talk about how the Church looked at this. And the Church, fundamentally, Orthodox and Roman Catholic economics are the same. Okay, when we talk about, it's not really Orthodox or Roman Catholic, it's really just Christian, classical Christian economics. And in this vision, okay, what's the purpose of man? It's man's salvation. Right? The purpose of man is salvation. So everything in man's life, including economics, including his work, his money, his wealth, everything should be oriented to man's salvation. Okay, so the means of production, our factories, our workshops, our farms, our mines, everything. The means of production exist to serve man, and man's eternal salvation is the highest concern of the rulers. Not just man as some earthly creature, but man as someone made in the image of God, whose purpose is salvation. So means of production exist to serve man and to serve man's ultimate purpose, which is salvation. And man's eternal salvation is the highest concern of his rulers. Man's eternal salvation is the highest concern of a Christian ruler. And the means of finance, where you get capital to pay for the means of production, right? Or to keep them going. Means of finance, in turn, exist to serve production. So finance, capital serves production serves man, and man serves God. But in the Luciferian economics, everything's turned upside down. Okay? Man serves production. He's just a widget in the widget factory, or he's just a gear in the factory, right? Man serves production. Production serves finance, where it's the capital becomes a thing in itself, not a means to produce stuff for man, but just a thing in itself. And this is so perverted, because then the factory or the farm, whatever, it just exists to produce more money for people who can control money, right? So man serves production serves finance, and the bankers rule everybody, and of course the bankers serve the devil. So this alchemical, perverted economics of usury finances the Promethean quest for unlimited technological progress in the service of the occult oligarchy of the money power, who use their army of technocrats, the managerial class, and their monopolistic control of education, medicine, the communications media, and violent means of coercion to enslave the human race. Thus is born the new Atlantis. End of notes from Class 17, written 2 years ago. All right, folks. Again, I wrote these words 2 years ago. This was not, when we wrote this class, when we gave this class, it was not a knee-jerk conspiracy theory, freaked out response reaction to a crisis. In the relative calm of that time 2 years ago, we were simply discussing the birth and development of the modern world as we know it, the modern world that we live in. The point is this. The process I describe above of private moneyed interests gaining control over formerly legitimate governments and thereby ruling masses of people through the exploitation of technology. This process obviously did not stop at the end of Renaissance. It didn't stop in 1626 when Francis Bacon died, right? On the contrary, it grew exponentially in speed and power throughout the modern era, right up to now. Through the takeover of government by private interest groups, a small group of people, over time, have corralled all of the wealth of the world. This is not some secret knowledge gained from conspiracy websites. Okay, this is everybody knows this. Okay, it's well known that now in the 21st century, a tiny group of people control 90% of the real wealth in the world. Not money. Money's an alchemical cipher, a technique, right? They control the real wealth, the mines, the farms, the air itself, the water itself, right? The real wealth. As their wealth increased, obviously, so did their power over every aspect of society. As their wealth increased, so increased their power over every aspect of society. And this society in a post-Christian world that we live in, it's a post-Christian world, right? Since it's post-Christian, the society is necessarily totally dedicated to material ends. Material ends, not eternal salvation. And because it's devoted totally to the material aspect of life, it's easily dominated by the money power, the people who have the money, and who can provide material pleasure and help you avoid pain. The theoretical sciences that undergird technology are not a magical, monolithic truth machine that's always right. I'm going to watch Bill Nye the Science Guy and learn the truth, right? I'm going to watch DeGrasse Tyson. He's going to liberate my mind with true science. This is stupid. Okay? Let's say it again. The theoretical sciences that undergird technology are not a magical, monolithic truth machine that's always right. Not some little Pope of Rome that's going to save you from error, right? The academics who are involved in the sciences rely on money. And I know this. I have friends, doctors, postdocs, PhD professors. This is not, I'm not making this up, or I didn't read about this, in some neo-Nazi website, right? I know people who work in universities, run universities, and all the rest. Who friends who are postdocs in biological sciences, and so forth, and doctors, so forth and so on. Okay. The academics involved in the sciences rely on money, and if they want money, they come up with the results that the money power says they must. Or they get shunted aside, they lose their jobs, they don't get promoted, and so forth and so on. If, being honest and dedicated scientists, they happen to come up with different results, they become non-persons. The professors lose their jobs, the doctors lose their licenses. Their talks on the internet get deplatformed, and so forth. They might even be assassinated. Pardon me, I had to pause there for a minute because a big garbage truck was passing. One of the benefits of modern technological society, right? Come pick up your garbage. So it was making a lot of noise, so I had to pause there for a second. Let me finish. I'll repeat. The academics involved in the sciences rely on money. And if they want money, they have to come up with the results the money power says they have to come up with. If, being honest and dedicated scientists, which many are, they come up with the wrong results, that is, the ones the people in power don't want, they can become non-persons, Professors lose their jobs. Doctors lose their licenses. Their talks on the internet get deplatformed. Their characters get assassinated. They might get assassinated. If you have read the biography of Father Seraphim Rose, you may remember that he was writing back in the 1950s, when he was a graduate student, in the early 50s, about how academics at that time were totally corrupt. Does anyone really think it's better now? Everyone knows that the universities and research institutions are controlled and corrupt. They're completely controlled, they're completely corrupt. Even where their faculties include honest men here and they're out there, even when the faculties include honest scholars, the administrations are dominated, if not totally occupied, by technocrats, controlled by the global financial oligarchy. And it is they, the technocrats, not the scholars, who decide which ideas are acceptable and which ideas are going to be promoted to the society at large. These ideas are then relentlessly shoved down our throats by the great stereopticon, the ubiquitous, relentless propaganda machine. Why then should Orthodox Christians bow down to science as some kind of a god? Why should we accept the delusions of the false religion of scientism? It is later than we think.